Welcome to a hot and sultry St. John Fisher Bills training camp. Oh my goodness. The beads of sweat were rolling down our backs. About 10 minutes of standing on the sideline. Might have been the toastiest practice of camp here at St. John Fisher for the Bills thus far. I think my eyelids were sweating today. That doesn't usually happen.
I can't believe how these guys do it with full pads on. It is crazy to watch them go out there and go into team period with it being this hot outside. I resulted in going to the cooler that we have for media members, grabbing ice, and I was handing it out to people. I was putting it on my neck, putting it on my arms. It felt incredible. But I don't know how these guys do it. Hats off to them.
Yeah, and pretty productive practice, all things considered. And I was there. We'll get to like the nuts and bolts of it here as we move through. But what we should tell you first is that there is an official diagnosis and prognosis for safety Cole Bishop. It is a shoulder injury for Cole, who, as we know, left practice. What was that, Tuesday?
It would be Tuesday.
Mm-hmm. They had the off day Wednesday. Today's Thursday. So Tuesday, left practice early. It is a shoulder injury, and it is labeled week to week. So the Bills now have two safeties with week-to-week injuries, Bishop with the shoulder, Edwards with the hamstring. The two newest safeties added to the roster because of that shortage did work in a little bit in teamwork already, which kind of speaks to how dire the shortage is. We had Brandon Bean on the show earlier in the week, and he was of the opinion that Kareem Jackson might not see team reps until next week. They're already rotating them in. Now we're talking 2 or 3 snaps at most.
Right.
But they're getting worked in, so that means they're at least picking it up, and that's the advantage when you sign veterans in a situation like this. They can generally pick up a system relatively quickly, especially a guy like Kareem Jackson. He's probably played in like 8 different systems, so he's used to having to learn one on the fly. And so he was in for a few more reps than Terrell Burgess was today defensively.
Yeah, Kareem Jackson was drafted in 2010, Terrell Burgess in 2020. So guys who have played some time in the league, especially Kareem Jackson, we saw him rotate in for a couple of snaps, as Brownie says. But it's also nice thinking about guys being added to the roster at this point in the season, knowing that cuts aren't coming anytime soon. If this week-to-week injury by Mike Edwards and Cole Bishop is going to go on for more than 1 week, it's nice to know that these guys are going to have some time to be able to pick up this defense.
Right. The other bit of news concerns another player who left early on Tuesday and actually had to be hospitalized. Alec Anderson, who was suffering from heat illness symptoms, had to get rehydrated at the hospital, got released on Tuesday afternoon, and was going to be no worse for wear after a full recovery of getting rehydrated. He was back on the practice field today, but Maddy and I both noticed did not take any team reps. He did individual position drills and did some other things, but did not do team reps, so they're clearly easing him back in. I would suspect, though, that provided he came through today's practice okay, he'll probably be full go on Friday for the blue and red scrimmage.
Yeah, he was in full uniform, didn't have a red jersey or anything like that on, a non-contact jersey. So it was good to see him back out there. I would imagine he gets brought back into the fold here pretty quickly.
Chase Claypool still not practicing day-to-day with the toe. Ty Johnson not participating in practice with the hamstring. So those guys still on the sidelines trying to work their way back. Lyle Collins left practice early today. He stepped out of team work, went into the tent with the docs and the trainers, and then came back out, but the trainer had his helmet, which means his day is over, and he walked to the locker room after that, probably with about 15 minutes left in practice. So we'll have to get an answer as to what that might be perhaps tomorrow from Coach McDermott back in Orchard Park at the blue and red scrimmage. Other news and notes, I would say Kaiir Elam had a very strong start to practice. He had back-to-back plays, broke up a pass in the end zone intended for Matt Collins during 7-on-7 red zone, and then blew up a screen to the flat and almost intercepted it, which would have been a pick six going the other way, but couldn't hold on to the football. And as we heard Bob Babich and some of his teammates say, when Kaiir is playing confidently, that's when he's playing his best, and I think we saw evidence of that today.
Yeah, it was really good form, too, that he used to break those passes up. We know Kaiir is a very physical player, and we know what he offers this game. We know that he excels in things like press coverage. So when you're seeing him repping in 7-on-7 or on team, and you're seeing that good form, it's amazing for a player like Elam, who we have seen the flag thrown on him a few times throughout practices for being a little bit too handsy. We've heard from several players who have spoken about Kaiir Elam and this fresh start for the cornerback, and a lot of guys will say Kaiir just needs to be Kaiir, meaning that he shouldn't take too much of an effort to get inside his head, to think too much, to worry too much. It seems like a lot of players are encouraging him to just go out there and play, knowing that Kaiir Elam is he is his worst critic, and a lot of guys have said Kair's doing a great job already. He just needs to go out there and play.
Right, and as we've said on this show before, he has an elite skill set. It gives him the ability to do some spectacular things, and we almost saw it on the near pick six going the other way on the throw to the flat. What he has to do is just eliminate the valleys of his game and make the floor of what he is out on the field more consistent. He does that, he'll be on the field more than he is not. And just to update everybody, he is still rotating through with the top two corners, Benford and Douglas. First series, it'll be like Douglas and Benford, and then the next series, the ones come out. Elam will spell one of those two, and then the other one will rotate out last. And they've kind of gone that way pretty much since the start of camp. So clearly his play is keeping him in the mix there with the top unit. Other notes to make about the defense, Cam Lewis, who's played almost exclusively nickel corner through the course of training camp, moved to safety, due in part to the shortage there at the position because of injury, and then rotating up to fill his spot in the nickel because you have Taron Johnson. Cam's kind of his backup. The guy that rotated up in that spot was Corey Couch, the undrafted rookie out of Miami, who's caught my eye a couple of times here through the first week of practices. And then the other player who's filled in there, albeit far less so, is Kenai Lovely, who's worked in the slot a little bit. Daquan Hardy's been there in a spot role here and there, but he's also lined up outside, so he's kind of splitting his time. Many people thought when he was drafted, automatic slot, but they're working him outside, which is a little surprising for a DB that only goes 5'9", 178.
Yeah, Hardy got quite a bit of work today outside, and I wanted to point out about Corey Couch. He had a fumble recovery today. There was a pass intended for a tight end. We weren't sure which tight end
too much traffic.
was. Too much traffic going on. But Balin Spector blew up the play. He forced the fumble. A defensive lineman was able to get his hands on it, but couldn't get the fumble recovery, so the ball bounced around and ended up in the hands of Corey Couch.
Yeah, so a nice play for him today, as well as for Balin Spector, for that matter, for the forced fumble, because his hit popped the ball loose. Offensively, I would say tight end Zach Davidson had perhaps his best day in the passing game, and Khalil Shakir had another strong day. First play of 11-on-11 red zone, offense, defense, Josh Allen rears back, and it might have been his most impressive pass of camp because the window he threw it into was maybe 18 inches by 18 inches, and it was a seed right to Khalil Shakir in stride. As a matter of fact, there were media members over our shoulder going, how did he get that there? Did he throw it over his shoulder? And they're like, no, he zipped it in there between two defenders. Beautiful throw, better catch, and Shakir is just shifty. Like, he's got these shoulder fakes at the top of his route stem, and as a DB, it's hard not to react to those and hold your water. And as soon as you flip your hips, he's going the other way, and that's where he gets the separation. So he's really good about getting up on the toes of the corner and forcing them to make a decision.
Later on in practice, when they weren't working in the red zone during a team period, Khalil Shakir had another really impressive grab by Josh Allen, who threw it over the middle. Terrell Bernard was guarding Khalil Shakir and was on him about as best as you can be, but Shakir had a really nice grab and coverage. It seems like he's the type of guy, it doesn't seem like, he is the type of player where Josh Allen can zip it into a tight window, and we know because Khalil Shakir has such great hands, led the NFL among wide receivers last season, that Josh Allen can trust if he's tightly covered, he's probably going to make a really good play on the ball.
Other notes to make about the defense, I thought this was the best, I shouldn't say the best, the most consistent execution of run defense by the defensive unit today. There were tackles for loss. They bottled up some inside runs. Remember the first 2 days, Maddie, the running backs were running wild through giant holes and like 30-yard, 40-yard runs to the end zone. There was none of that today in the red zone. Now, granted, it's a little tighter confines down inside the 20 and the tight red area, but they were fitting it up really well. The communication was good. So you're kind of seeing here now a week into camp, the run defense, guys are getting used to playing off one another. The communication pre-snap is good, and the execution as a result was good as well. Daquan Jones had a tackle for loss. Cam Lewis fit up a run fit really nicely and got a pat on the rear end from Bobby Babich, the DC, after the play. So I thought the run defense was much more consistent than we saw earlier in camp.
Yeah, defensive tackle Austin Johnson also had a TFL
right.
there as well. And I think a player who we are and his teammates are very impressed by, who's been making his presence known on the defensive line, is DeJuan Smoot. He's been everywhere. Daquan Jones spoke to the media earlier today and said right after practice, Jones said, Smoot is someone who is so athletic. We're able to use him in a lot of different ways, and Daquan Jones said I wasn't expecting that of him, but it's been fun to watch during camp.
It might be a little bit much to ask him to play defensive tackle, but he could play under tackle on passing downs, absolutely. And there are going to be some decisions that are going to have to be made on that defensive line. If you keep 10, are you going to go 5 and 5, or are you going to go 6 ends, 4 DTs? And then Smoot is your swing player between the two positions? There are some difficult decisions that are going to have to happen there. The other decision that could get interesting here, if Davidson keeps this up, is at the tight end position, because Quentin Morris has had a solid camp himself, but he's kind of entrenched as the third tight end here. If Davidson has a nice preseason, 6'7", 251, and he can run. Now, he doesn't run like Kincaid, but for a player that's 6'7", he runs better than people give him credit for, and he made some plays today, and he's got a humongous catch radius. This is a kid who was on the practice squad and then tore his ACL last year and basically rehabbed all of last year. But I could see a future on the 53-man roster for him. And look, I'm not trying to kick Dawson Knox out the door, but the fact is his cap hit next year is $14.3 million. Now, they could fix that and give him a new deal and reduce his cap hit considerably, add a year or two onto the contract, and all is well. But if that doesn't happen, and you need to think about an heir apparent, I think Davidson's in the pipeline, and I think will be a consideration going forward. If for some reason he doesn't make the 53 this year and they got to put him on the practice squad, you just hope somebody doesn't poach him. It's
been fun to watch a healthy Zach Davidson throughout 7 practices now. And just the battle between Quentin Morris and Davidson. They throw Quentin Morris out there, he makes a play. Then they throw Zach Davidson out there, he makes a play. So it's been really back and forth throughout camp. But it's hard to ignore the stature that Zach Davidson has to offer. And I think you have to ask yourselves, and the coaching staff does, tight ends coach Rob Boris has to ask himself this, is along with offensive coordinator Joe Brady, is what do you want out of that tight end 3 position? What is most important for you? Are you looking for someone who can be thrown in as a pass catcher, or are you valuing blocking a little bit more?
Yeah. Last note from practice today, pass rush. Von Miller looked good again today. Good burst off the edge, which was encouraging to see. It's not like you saw it once and then you didn't see it again the next practice. We saw it again here in practice today. Granted, there's a day off in between, but truthfully, Maddie, and I've talked to Steve about this, here on One Bills Live. I think Von's going to be a pass rush specialist for this team at age 35. I think he's going to play 30 snaps a game and play in obvious passing situations, and that's it. Because I think if you want to get a 10-sack season out of Von, that's how you got to play him.
If that's what you need to do to see those numbers out of him, you got to be able to do it. Maybe that's why they brought some veterans in here at the defensive line spot, edge rushers and defensive tackles. You speak to players like Ed Oliver and Daquan Jones about the makeup of this defensive line this season, and they were impressed by what Brandon Beane did in bringing in guys who have played valuable minutes and who have valuable numbers in this game across several seasons. But it's also fun to hear these players talk about how Von Miller is acting now. Deion Dawkins, a couple days ago, Von Miller was able to get a few sacks during practice, and we asked Deion Dawkins about it after practice. And said 40 is back. He's acting like himself. His aura is
the
back.
Von aura, that's what he said.
Don't worry about him anymore. And to hear that from a teammate who just had to go up against him all practice, I think says a lot.
Another defensive end who I thought flashed today was Casey Toohill.
Yeah.
Had a quarterback pressure, had a would-be sack, I think.
Yep.
So I think he's rounding into form as well. And, you know, some of our listeners and viewers may not be totally familiar with Casey Toohill. Signed in free agency away from Washington, much like they did several years ago in 2018 when they signed Trent Murphy away from Washington. Ironically, both of those men played their college ball at Stanford. And Toohill's skill set is pretty similar to that of Trent Murphy, but I would argue that Toohill has more bend and athleticism than Murphy had, who was a little stiffer athlete, although he was an effective pass rusher. I think he's kind of a meat and potato, and I think he's on the roster this year. Again, this is where this defensive end / defensive tackle total is going to matter.
Yeah.
And, you know, if Von's only playing 30 snaps a game, he's not a full-time end, but you want to keep him. Okay, well then you need another guy that is going to help in those run fits and setting the edge, and I think Toohill could fit that bill for them.
Toohill also had 5 sacks last season and 7 quarterback hits. I remember when we signed him in the offseason looking at those numbers and thinking, okay, we're adding something to the line.
Yeah, and he's used to being a reserve rotational player because of all those first-round picks they had in Washington with Chase Young and Jonathan Allen and Montez Sweat and all those guys. So that group looks a lot different this year because they traded one of them and the other guy moved on, got traded as well. They traded both their ends, as a matter of fact. So they're looking at Toohill here now, and I think he'll probably be on the 53 come roster cut-down time.